Hey everyone, JD White here. I just wanted to send a quick apology for the quality on this town hall that we just filmed. I bought a new webcam that was supposed to be pretty awesome, and we filmed this thing, and I've been trying to edit it, and the quality is awful. So I apologize for that. Thanks for bearing with us. I am not a videographer. So we're doing the best we can, but appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy this.
Welcome to the February 2023 edition of our virtual town hall, Whitehawk Wealth Management. I am JD White.
And I'm Cameron Dye.
And we are happy to be here. And honestly, I think we're both feeling happy that the markets and our investments have recovered some through Q4 and now so far year to date. So Cam's going to jump into the numbers a little bit. Quick, what's new with Whitehawk Wealth? Let's see, we did give the website a serious facelift. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go to the website here, and when you watch this, it'll be up there. We are trying to really show our value in our branding. So our value is that, our goal is to walk alongside our clients and serve as more of a Sherpa role. We want to get our clients from point A to point B and point B to point C, and all our branding is now representing that. So we will send out an email to our clients and friends and network, letting them know that the website is revamped. We just have not yet, so that'll be coming. Otherwise, 1099 season for us. We're hoping that those are finished up this Friday, February 17th. That'll be tomorrow. And we'll have most of our tax work behind us. If you're one of our clients, reminder, you can have us send those directly to your CPAs. We just have to get one form filled out, and we can send those off for you in the future. And we're happy to do that this year too. And obviously introduce ourselves to your CPAs, make sure they know who we are and that we are all on the same team. All right, today we're excited. We have a special guest with us. Greig is going to give us an update on the Colorado real estate market. I think that we've all had fear of the housing market going into recession, so we'll see what he has to say. And then Cam is going to go ahead and kick it off. We had another CPI report come out last week on Valentine's Day. Not exactly the box of chocolates we were hoping for, but hey, it's a CPI report. Really exciting. And then we'll get into Will, and we've got a few other things on the slate. So Cam, what are you seeing so far this year?
So CPI came out, like JD was saying. It was disinflationary in the sense that it was lower than last month. So it came out at 6.4 versus 6.5 last month. It's a little bit hotter than the 6.2 they were expecting. I would tend to say that that's sort of a nothing burger. You can listen to a lot of different opinions from a lot of different economists, and the market did a lot of up and down and then finished the day in the exact same place it started. So, disinflation is still intact. The trend is still intact. I think it came in at 6.4, so that was a little hot, but ultimately it was gas was up 2.4% and shelter was up 0.7%. And then to make things more complicated, because these numbers are so easy to understand anyway, the group of people that produced the CPI report have decided that instead of changing the metrics for what they're going to put into it every 2 years, they're going to do it every year. So this was the first reading under the new standards, which kind of compounded the issue because they actually increased the percentage of weighting that goes to shelter, which was one of the two things that was up on the month. So of that increase, or I guess of that increase of what it was, 3/4 of that was due to sort of the increase in housing weighting on the measure. So again, it's not as low as we would have liked to see, certainly still in the sixes, but lower than the month before and kind of continuing that disinflationary trend. So hopefully that continues. And as far as markets go, off to a good start in 2023. There's the old adage that the year will go as January goes, and if that's the case, then we're looking pretty good. The S&P was up about 7.4% in January so far year to date, so through this first part of February as well. And core bonds were up 2.5%. So 60-40 portfolio, everything's green, everything's positive on the year. And to top that off, basically all of the same things were up in the fourth quarter. So you were looking at 4 to 5% in the fourth quarter as well, depending on specifically what you look at. And then again, we're up this part of this year. So that's all good news.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I don't know if anyone else is going to catch this, but you did just say nothing burger. I've never heard that before. Well, I also did not know the metrics change.
Oh, well,
so
I'm an old man. I threw out a phrase nobody's ever heard. You know.
All right. So with the CPI report coming in where it did, I think a question that a lot of people are going to have and that we get is, what's the Fed going to do moving forward? With that report, is there any change on that front, or
right.
What are we hearing from the Fed?
Yeah, and I would say no. I think Chairman Powell was very specific in his verbiage this last meeting when he kept using the plural for hikes. I think if this number last week had come in, way below expectations, there was the slight chance that maybe they would say, okay, we're going to raise in March and then we're going to hold. I think with this number being slightly elevated from what they expected, they are for sure going to go ahead with the 2 hikes and actually take him at his word. So then you're looking at a 25 basis point hike in March, 25 basis point hike in May. They've kind of, this last reading sort of did open the door for a potential 3rd hike in June if numbers don't continue to go down as fast as they would like. But I would think all of these are going to be 25 basis point hikes. And it's just kind of a continuation of what they've said. All along, they've said they want to get above 5, as much as none of us want to hear it. They have been very straightforward about that. So this next one gets us to 5, and then the one in May would put us over 5. So I think that's likely the stopping point, unless the data changes dramatically. And they seem to be pretty good right now at sticking to their guns. They'll continue to watch the employment numbers. Unemployment came out today, and similar to, I guess, the CPI number, it was actually lower than expected, which for employment is the same sort of slight miss as far as the Fed is concerned for cooling things down. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I don't think that the slightly higher than expected CPI number really matters all that much at this one point in time. Same thing, I don't think the unemployment number matters all that much at this one point in time. So we'll just keep watching and likely see 2 more hikes.
Slow and steady. Yeah, sounds like probably back half of this year before the Fed's done point talks on that. So.
Yeah.
All right, so without further ado, I'm going to have you introduce Will. Let me see if I can get the split screen.
Yeah, so if you're anything like me, you're on Zillow at least once a week, checking out the neighbors' houses and what's for sale in the area and kind of monitoring things. And so today we are lucky enough to have an actual expert in the field of real estate here, William Greig. He is a real estate agent for the Patrick Brown Group at Compass in Boulder. They work in Boulder County. And he is going to hopefully give us some insight as to what he is seeing in the real estate market and what we can kind of expect for the rest of this year. So I'll let you take it away, Will.
A long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks to JD and Cameron for having me on. Been listening to these things for a while now and really appreciate what you guys do and help put my mind at ease with what's going on in the financial world. So in the last couple of years, we've seen some incredible markets, and I don't think they were particularly fun for anyone. Even while sellers were very happy to see significant gains on their homes, it was very stressful for everyone involved when people were selling houses for dramatically over asking, and you'd have 18 offers, and the situation was just very frenzied. And then on the buyer side, that it never felt good. We have seen the market start to cool. That kind of started last summer and into the fall. Typically, we would have seen things pick back up after the summer, starting around Labor Day. We saw that some, but not as much. And then, of course, we've had the typical, holiday slowdown. But now things are picking back up. But before I dig in more there, I wanted to answer the question that you asked, which is, are we going to see a massive pullback in pricing? And I think in City of Boulder and even in larger Boulder County, I think the answer is no, generally. And that's an issue of supply and demand. We still have low inventory such that 3 months of inventory at most in City of Boulder and surrounding where you really need 6 for a balanced market. And then seeing more inventory, what might cause us to see more inventory. And I think I have trouble, and my team has trouble seeing what those things might be. You have two primary pieces of the market. One would be somebody that owns their house outright. And if they do, then what would compel them to sell their house for a significant loss if they owe nothing on it? And then second, if they have a mortgage, and if they've had one for at least a couple of years, no one has an interest rate that's more than 5 if they've owned their house for 2 years, unless they haven't been paying attention. So I always use myself as an example, but to move from a 2.625 interest rate or a 2.99 or a 3.25 to a 6.25, you're losing 30% of your purchasing power. And so you have to make so much more money to make that switch, that reason for moving has to be really compelling. So I don't see, and we don't see, that there's going to be a 20-30% pullback in pricing that some people are predicting in other markets. I think we've seen a little bit of a slowdown, and even if you look at the market data, for City of Boulder, January 23, compared to December of 23, like in December, we were down 63% for sold listings, but in January, we were only down 30%. So the market is really starting to come back. To go back a little bit, that summer slowdown that we saw, we also had higher interest rates. So that exacerbated the effect. Thanksgiving, Christmas slowed down. This was when we had some of the highest interest rates that we've seen. So that again exaggerated the effect. The pickup that we're seeing after the holiday, which is increasing weekly, part of what you're seeing there is a perspective shift, that people aren't upset that they're paying 5% instead of 3%. Now maybe they're happy that they're paying 6% instead of 7%. And that's kind of a recalibration, and looking historically, these interest rates, while they're not pretty or pleasant, aren't as bad as they could be. You look at City of Boulder, Patrick, my partner at work, he just had a buyer on a $13 million house that closed in January. That ultra luxury sector in Boulder is expanding quickly. I was just talking with Cam the other day about a $15 million house that was listed on Lee Hill right by Dakota Ridge. That $13 million was the highest recorded sale in Boulder history. We know that that's not the actual highest sale. There've been some off-market things, but it's up there. That $15 million house would be up there. Some of the homes that are sitting longer, we are seeing that those were often priced with future appreciation in mind, and that's not something you can do. You can't price future appreciation in when the market's not in that frenzy that it was last year. So having good advice is always important, and we saw about 100,000 realtors leave the industry between October and January nationwide. When things get rocky, that's when the professionals continue. Same in your industry. I'm not going to try to predict the economy at all. I'll leave that to you guys. But I talked with a few lenders that I work with quite a bit to ask their opinions on what they see for interest rates for the year, since that's their field of expertise. The general consensus is that we're going to see 30-year fix in the mid-5s this year, and those predictions vary by once we see light at the end of the tunnel, we'll see rates start dropping, and maybe starting in March and then more in May, we'll see rates come down. Another one said they think we'd see low 5s by May, June. And then another one gave a kind of interesting piece of advice. He said, buy, and remember that good financing is what fits for a certain environment. When the environment changes, the right financing might as well. And that lender actually is offering, free refinance, which is kind of common for a lot of lenders right now to protect against those future rate drops. And then the National Association of Realtors, they're saying that if inflation continues to slow down, this is what they expect for 23, then they think rates will stabilize below 6 in 2023. Right now, all my clients that are financing, I'm advising them to pick up an adjustable rate mortgage because there's no reason to lock yourself in. You can always refi down the road, but and that most people think they're going to be in a house forever, but most people are not in a house forever. So
what is the actual average life of a homeowner? Do you know?
We say 5 to 7 is generally, yeah. And you have to figure that on a 30-year fixed, the bank or the lender is making good money on a 30-year fixed that you only pay off in 5 to 7, because so much of those payments are front loaded on interest. And that is a piece that we talk a lot about with our clients, because there are some lenders that were refinancing people over and over, even within, I had one client that refinanced 3 times in a year without saying anything to me, and I was just appalled at the lender for giving them such poor advice, because to refinance from 3.5 to 3.4 and then to 3.3 doesn't actually do you any good. Predictions for the spring, we think we're going to see a strong spring market. Boulder is certainly an insulated thing. Boulder County is also insulated, but there's just not enough inventory, and people are starting to come back to the table. So there's a lot that pulls everyone to Boulder and Boulder County, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. Any questions that I can answer for you guys?
Sounds like a prime market. You know what I did there? Prime. Deon Sanders? No. Okay. I was going to ask you off the cuff. I was going to ask you if you're seeing more of the adjustable rate loans or the like the 2-1 buydowns to get people buying, to get them into that comfort zone. But you kind of answered that.
Well, the 2-1 buydowns are interesting product. I think it depends on the buyer and the budget and the price rather. The 2-1 buydowns are really interesting because that money that's spent on that 2-1 buydown goes into an escrow account that then if you refi a year later and there's money left in that account, that just comes back to that borrower. And so it's not money that's just spent, and if you sell the house or refinance that it goes away, it belongs to that borrower, which is really great. That temporary relief is really meaningful in a lot of cases. But it all depends on the person. I still say that I am amazed at how much cash I see. That just, that $13 million house, that was cash, of course. There is just so much cash around this market. It is sickening at times because it's just so prevalent. So that's a great question. And the answer is that it depends. It can be worked into a deal in a multitude of ways, but one of the most common would be to either, let's say a house was offered for $1 million and you wrote an offer for $1 million, but with a concession of $30,000. That's a way that money could be applied towards a buydown. On inspection, you might negotiate some amount off the price for issues that you find, and that can be done in the case of a seller concession that can be used towards a buydown. I'm not seeing as many buyers pay for buydowns because if they have the money to pay for the buydown, then they can just use that money to pay more to substitute on their payment. So I'm not seeing that. Buyers are usually, it is a thing. So the short answer to your question is usually I am seeing sellers pay for that in some way or another because the buyer needs it, and if they had the cash, then they would do something different with their mortgage product.
Can you real quick just explain what a 2-to-1 buydown is?
Yeah, so let's say you go on your $1 million house, you're putting down 20%, mortgaging $800,000, and you are going to pay a certain number of points, a cost from the lender to, instead of having that rate be, let's say 6.25. A 2-1 buy down would mean that instead of 6.25, the first year it's going to be 4.25, and the second year it's going to be 5.25, and then the third year it's going to be that 6.25. And so it's just giving you that temporary relief. We're also seeing a 3-2-1 buy down, or a 3-1. You know, there are a multitude of ways that it can happen.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. It's giving borrowers a lot of options, and while rates are higher, if they do in fact want to lock in the 30-year.
And one critical difference between a buy down and points, you know, so if you, a lender will offer you to buy the rate down and they'll charge you for that. You do that and you refinance and you don't get that money back. That's just a fee that you paid at closing and that money's gone. The 2-1, the temporary, or 2-1 or the 3-2-1 or whatever it is, that money goes into an escrow account, as I said. And so if you refinance, that money comes back to you, which is, you know, a little bit of insurance against the uncertainty of the future of what might come.
For sure. No,
Yeah. All right, we'll thank you so much, and we'll keep moving forward here. So yeah,
thank you. I'm gonna turn my camera off.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm gonna put all your info in the YouTube channel. It'll be down here somewhere. So I'll put, it'll be down there. I'll put all your contact information, link to your website. It'll all be down there. So if anybody has any questions, they'll reach out to you and they'll find, they'll buy or sell their next home in Boulder County. Hopefully $13 million, and they'll call you up.
Thank you very much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate what you do.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
appreciate it, Will.
All right. So next up, I'm going to talk about a little education piece here. And this is something that's come up actually quite a bit here in the last year. So as part of and it's beneficiary IRA rules, the Secure Act, the original Secure Act that was passed in 2020, changed the rules for how money in an inherited IRA needs to be withdrawn. And really it's the timing of it. So prior to 2020, you could use your life expectancy and stretch that out. So now under the new rules, if you're a spouse and you inherit an IRA, you can still use your life expectancy, and what we call that is a stretch strategy. So you're able to take out a kind of a little piece of that IRA over what the IRS determines your life expectancy to be, so that at the end it's a zero. Now we grow it and we screw up their plans. Pretty much anyone else, with a few exceptions, that's not a spouse that inherits an IRA now has to withdraw those funds in a 10-year period. And that's creating some planning situations for us. If you think about it, so just hypothetical situation, because those are always easy to understand. If I have $1 million in an IRA, and I'm the sole survivor and I pass away, my son inherits that IRA of $1 million. He now has to withdraw that over a 10-year period. If we weren't getting returns on it, that's $100,000 a year that now has to be, give or take, that has to be dumped into his taxable income. And so I'm essentially now moving him into a new tax bracket. So something that you need to be aware of, especially as we're seeing, a lot of wealth pass from generation to generation. And what we do is we try and, if we get one of those, we have a spreadsheet, real nerdy, where we kind of have figured out what percentage we need to draw if we're getting extra returns to make it as even as possible over those years. And really work with our clients, because if our client has a low income year, we can potentially take more out of that IRA. So that's, that's kind of where we come in. Again, it's the Sherpa piece. But also, there are strategies for getting that money out of that bucket before you pass away. So, if I'm getting further down the road in my life, and I have a couple lower income years, or maybe I'm hugging up against some income brackets, I could work with my CPA or my accountant and convert some of that over to either into a Roth IRA, would be really ideal, pay the income tax on it, and now that bucket is tax-free to the next generation. They still have to take it over 10 years. There's no tax consequence. So that's something that we work with kind of on both sides of the equation. we can catch it before that money has to pass, and we can also deal with it as it gets to the next generation. So anyway, that's all I have on that. I'm going to segue into something that's probably more fun to listen to. We brought in a professional athlete here to talk to us, a former professional athlete. What's cool about Cam is that I've known Cam for 25 plus years. Forever. I had the pleasure of competing against Cam as swimmers, high school through all the way past college. And there's something, I didn't go pro. I never went pro in a sport as an athlete. This is why I went pro. And it takes a special mental kind of sword to get there. So just a little background on Cam. Cam raced professionally as a triathlete as his sole income in Olympic distance triathlons for the better part of 12 plus years. Right over 12.
Yeah, it's about 12 years.
I stayed up late night watching Cameron race in several different countries on several different continents. And there's a different mental toughness that comes with training to be and competing at the professional level. So I want to talk to Cam about how that can carry over into investing, because it's kind of a weird tie, but it kind of works. So yeah. I'm going to pass that to you to kind of tie that together.
Let me see if I can put a bow on that. I think oftentimes people think about mental toughness as, like climb Mount Everest, or the guy that does something just extraordinary. And there's certainly mental toughness involved in that. But I would argue there's probably just as much mental toughness in the day-to-day grind of a stay-at-home mom that wakes up with a new baby every day, or the high school kid like we used to that gets up at 4:30 in the morning to go swim in a pool. And I think a lot of times there's an easy relatability between sports and investing. There's a scoreboard, you know what it is every day. And then I think also the next step actually to the investing piece is the mental toughness comes in with the perseverance to stick to a plan. What makes a great athlete, and oftentimes what makes a great anything, financial planner, accountant, real estate agent, is the ability to sit down and come up with a goal and a plan of how you're going to achieve that goal. But then the third and the most important piece is actually then go out every day and do the things required to achieve that goal. I always prided myself as an athlete on being the first one there, the last one to leave, and the guy that was always there, basically. I think one of the greatest compliments I ever got was I have a friend, Flora Duffy, who actually was the gold medalist at this last Olympics in the women's triathlon. We trained together for the better part of a decade, and at her victory party when she came back from the games, she basically said, the best part about Cam was he was always there every day, ready to work. It was all business. When it was over, he went home and hung out with the family. And I think that consistency was what I really did pride myself on as an athlete. But I think that translates really well to an investor too, because there's no really one good day and there's no really bad one day either. The market's going to go up 4% one day, and then some other day it's going to go down 6%. And those days are either great or terrible, but neither one of them are what makes an investing strategy or career. When you're watching the numbers, if you watch them too close day to day, you get a lot of noise and you get a lot of volatility, and it's stressful. And I think, as an athlete, whether you felt good or whether you felt bad, you had to show up every day, do the session to the best of your ability, and then you go home and you don't think about it anymore because you got to show up again tomorrow and do the same thing. And I think that's what ultimately athletically got me to where it got to me. I was never the most talented person out there, but consistently showing up every day, doing the work over a long period of time pays dividends, and in investing, it pays literal dividends. I guess the better part about investing as opposed to sports is when you have a bad day, at least your money's still earning money. Your money's still compounding. So having the mental fortitude to either be able to just sort of stomach the volatility that we know is there, and as investors, the market's going to go up and down. So being able to stomach that is important. Or else know yourself well enough to know that you can't handle that. And although it's the right thing to do, it stresses you out. Don't check it as often. Oftentimes our biggest investors, our best clients, check their portfolios the least. And I think there's something to that too, knowing yourself. But ultimately, I mean, everybody can and is mentally tough to some degree. And I think being able to tap into that and being able to harness sort of the optimism and the positivity that goes along with being mentally tough, whether, you know, like I say, that's going to your job, doing your sports, taking your kids somewhere, supporting your kids, or whether it's, you know, looking at your portfolio and just being mentally tough to the point where you had a plan, you sat down with us or some other financial advisor, you created your own plan, and sticking to it, because day in and day out, that's how wealth is created, and not sticking to it is oftentimes how wealth is lost. I mean, investing is one of those sports where sometimes doing nothing is the best. And unlike sports where you actually have to show up and work your butt off, investing is a little less sweat, potentially a whole lot more victory at the end if you stick to your plan and just see it through. I mean, and the beauty of investing too is the plan can be modified as we go. I mean, we sit down with clients every year and go over their plan and make changes accordingly, just like I did in sports, where, you know, after a successful season, you figure out what worked and what didn't, and you make some changes. But I think that's I guess how you can best tie mental toughness to investing. So,
yeah, it's
hope
weird.
that made sense.
The field goes from, you know, the physical field to the field between your ears, and that's where the battle is.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to summarize a couple things here. So, have a plan. You were talking about showing up every day, so that's be consistent, stay disciplined.
Yep.
Ignore the highs and lows. I think we've all had bad, like as athletes, we've had bad training days, we've had a bad day in the gym, we've had a bad day at work, and you just got to let those go. And it's the same thing with bad periods of investing. Just let it go. It's okay. It doesn't define what you're doing with your investments. You're still going to just focus on the long term and stick to your plan. A year from now, you'd be glad you started today. Yeah, exactly. Like the worst thing that we can have happen with our clients is to have a conversation and say, you know, give them a recommendation, and then ultimately be sitting with them a year later and saying, oh man, I wish we would have. You know, we really, what we're preaching and what we're advising, we want action, because we don't want to be sitting there full of regrets or regret.
Either one.
All right, so we'll jump forward here to Q&A. We don't have any, well, unless the few of you that are on here want to ask a question now, let us know. But otherwise, I've got a couple questions that we've gotten from since our last town hall that we'll address. So first one is, this is a good one. So if I'm getting as much from my money market as I can from bonds, why should I invest in bonds at all?
It's a fair point. It's a good question, and it's not one we've had to answer for the last, 5-6 years, because interest rates were so low. 10 years. But now it is a real conversation, and I think when it comes to emergency savings, cash that you need on hand that needs to be not at risk, they're fantastic. Money markets that is the best place to be, because it's a savings account with better interest. So using money markets and high yield savings accounts for your emergency cash savings, things you're going to know you're going to need in the next year, that's perfect place for them. Bonds, the difference between those is sort of the reinvestment risk, because if you look at money market funds, as we saw a few years ago, I personally started a high yield savings account because rates hit like 2.5%, and at the time that was magical. Well, then basically every quarter that number got whittled down, because as interest rates fell, so did your savings in a money market, and that could happen again. And so the difference there is the reinvestment. When the money market matures, what's the next rate for said cash? And again, if it's emergency funds or money you know you're going to need, that's the place you want it no matter what. But if it's more long-term savings or investment money, so like more of your normal investment portfolio, the reason to look at bonds is you get rid of some of that reinvestment risk. I mean, when short duration bonds out to 2 and 3 years is paying 5-6%, and if you go longer than that, the number comes down a little bit, say it's only 4, but it's guaranteed for 7, 10, 20 years. That's the reason you lock that in, because you're basically saying, okay, I could maybe get a little bit better now, but I have no idea what rates are going to be in the future. And locking in that sort of like a 30-year fixed mortgage versus an adjustable rate mortgage. You don't know what the rate's going to be. So that's sort of the risk you're taking. Money markets are fantastic for your emergency savings. If you're looking longer down the road, then unless you're willing to jump in and out of different money markets and finding different ones all the time, then the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze.
Right. So, and just to add on to that, interest rate sensitivity is one thing that comes up, and shorter duration, so shorter term, fixed income securities have more interest rate sensitivity. The longer the duration, the lower the sensitivity to those interest rate moves. So that's what he says. When interest rates come down, that low end down here is going to drop down, and that's your savings accounts, money market funds. Your bonds will stay where they're at for the most part. So great answer. All right, so next question. What will the stock markets do if we do not go into a recession? Good question. Seem like we're answering this all the time. So remember that the stock markets are forward looking, and that's kind of how we got into this mess of 2022, was that the markets were looking at what the Fed was doing and what raising interest rates would do to the markets, and said you're going to crash the housing market, unemployment's going to fall through the floor, and we're going to go into a deep recession. And so now the market is actually already starting to sniff out the fact that it might not be as bad as it thought. So kind of reiterating something we've said many, many times, the market's going to figure out what the Fed's going to do. Once the Fed is done, the market's going to analyze the economy and see where unemployment and all those, and inflation and all those things sit. And then it's going to look forward and decide what it thinks the economy is going to do into probably next year. And the market's going to move in regards to that. If it is not as bad as what it already priced in, then it's going to come up. We're still pretty far down on the grand scheme of things. The S&P, the Dow, still down pretty significantly. Or sorry, the S&P and the Nasdaq. Yeah. Dow not as much because it's designed to be a little bit more stable. So ultimately, yeah, if we don't go into an actual recession, we're going to see more of what we've seen over the last 6 months. We're going to see things gradually move upward in the stock markets. Hopefully the bond market is nice and buoyant for us. Until next time, you go live your dreams.
Yeah.
And we look forward to guiding you along the way.
Yep. We got you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.